All right. We're good. All right. So apologize for that little interruption, but thank you for taking the time to be here. I really appreciate it. Could you take a second and introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about like who you are and your background, and then let's talk about this project that you are working on, because it's really interesting to me.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Eric MacKinnon. I guess my background, the best way to describe it is basically tech. I've a career sort of in product management. Prior to doing this, I was acting global head of product for Data AI, which is a mobile market intelligence company. And I guess in terms of the project itself, it's a math tutoring AI. And we are finding that it's working particularly well for kids with special needs. So kids dealing with anything from like cognitive impairment to ADHD to dyscalculia, dyslexia, things like that. And in terms of, I guess, how I got into this, my own experiences in school, I really struggled for most of my school career. And I guess something happened around grade 9, grade 10, where all of a sudden everything sort of came together for me in terms of my understanding of math. And I started doing really well, both in math and sciences. I was able to sort of ace tests, even if I hadn't studied, so long as there weren't any sort of like new linguistic elements, like new symbols I hadn't seen before, things you just wouldn't be able to sort of derive or figure out yourself. I could usually figure things out on the spot. And I began tutoring other kids at that point in time.
In high school?
In high school,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay.
And so, there was a teacher named Mr. Sargent that I really liked, and he ran this little sort of like lunchtime thing, and he invited me to come and help him out. And what I found there was that basically kids were being held back by just like sort of crazy learning gaps that were like things from like way earlier. Like this is high school at this point in time, at least in my life. But like kids had not understood something maybe from grade 5 or grade 4. And I was able to basically through Socratic questioning, so just, like asking leading questions, sort of like pinpoint what it was that they weren't quite understanding about a question. And you can often see this like based on how a kid answers a question. You can see like, okay, they got the question wrong. It's like the only way they could have gotten that wrong was by confusing this one thing. So you kind of like hone in on that and ask them, okay, tell me about this part here. How does that work? And then I would just sort of lay out sort of patterns and have them sort of work through the relationships of that particular concept so that they could sort of figure things out on their own. And then of course you bring them back to the original question and they can get it like no problem. And I found that was like it was such a common occurrence. But I also was thinking at the time, like this could be automated. Like you could actually create a system that would just sort of like be able to sort of do all of this on its own. Of course, at the time I didn't know how to program. I couldn't really build anything. So it's sort of like, it was always in the back of my mind. And then as I got more and more involved in tech, I started sort of seeing the possibility of building something like this, and eventually taught myself to program to build this. So this is actually my first coding project. I ended up building I don't even know if it'd be fair to call it a prototype. It was very, very rough, but it was something that could demonstrate the potential of this kind of approach. And I tested it with some families, and already they were, I was getting some feedback like, this is already working better than, there was one family, they had hired 2 tutors prior to using our system. And they were basically saying that the system seemed to be helping more than the tutors that they had previously hired.
So we've talked before a little bit, because I've been playing around with this for a little while now, and it's called Grokkoil, right?
Yes.
I'm saying that
yes.
Right? Grokkoil? Like broccoli.
Yes, yeah, it's like grok and broccoli. It's sort of, healthy vegetable, and grok to understand something it's in its entirety.
Is that where the name came from?
Yeah, so grok, it's a term that's used. It's kind of like heavily used in like programming culture and in other spaces. But to grok something means to, so the way it's used now, it more means to like really understand the essence of something. That's kind of how it's used now.
Okay.
But the original use of the term, it's actually from a science fiction novel. It really meant to understand something in its totality, such that it's now almost like a part of you.
Oh, all right. Yeah. I meant to ask you where the name came from, because it's such a unique name, and I was just curious. Now that makes perfect sense. Okay. So you actually learned to code specifically to do this.
Yes.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, no, it was not easy. I spent an embarrassing number of years trying to build this, and this is probably not trying to build something like this or something that approximated what our system can do is probably not the best for, like sort of first coding project. But it definitely helped me learn. So it was if nothing else, it was definitely beneficial from that perspective.
So how many years do you have kind of invested in this project?
So I worked on this sort of like on weekends for, I was obviously I was working, I was employed. I worked on this on weekends for like I think it was over 5 or 6 years before deciding, okay, I think I have enough here that I can start like testing this out and sort of seeing how well it does. Um, but I mean, that's it's like, in startup land, all of this would be red flags. Like you're not supposed to be spending this amount of time on something. You're supposed to rapidly test stuff, push things out, get feedback right away, and then like either shut down what you're doing because it's clearly not working, or like just like jump to actually working on it. But yeah, in my case, it was kind of like a passion project for several years before.
I was going to say, just from when we've talked, this is like a labor of love, right? And so the impression that I've had as we've talked about this over the last, I guess, few weeks is this is a very, it's a really important project to you. And, you can tell when you actually use it. And so let's go into what actually it is and how it works. And then I can share like my experience with it. So for people out there who are trying to kind of wrap their heads around what we're talking about, what is Grokkoil? And how does it work, I guess?
Yeah. So Grokkoil, it is a math tutoring AI. It currently supports K-5. We are adding like level 6 support in the next, like, in the upcoming weeks. But it is currently K-5. It's actually a little bit old school. The technology, we're using expert systems. And so this, we're not using like a generative AI or any kind of like the newer stuff just yet. So our system, it's not module based. You don't go in, you don't like decide what you want to learn. The system sort of triangulates where the kids' abilities are, what they need to learn next. And it really kind of like guides the kid along like a learning path we've done everything we can to make that as optimal as possible. And it's for this reason that we're seeing like such high like acceleration rates in terms of learning, right? We're seeing kids learn 3 to 4 times faster. In many cases, it's like kids with like multiple learning differences, learning 3 to 4 times faster than non-special needs kids are expected to learn in school.
Mm-hmm.
And often this is in cases where like, the kid might be in grade 4, but performing at a grade 1 level. So, despite years of school receiving, special academic support from the schools, just not making much progress.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can certainly go in, like I can add like another level of detail in terms of what the system does and like why it ends up being helpful and how it's like far more personalized and far more helpful for kids like in an individual basis. But that's sort of it in a nutshell.
For all the people out there who aren't as nerdy as you and I, because I love the whole like I'm learning AI right now. I've got some books and I'm using it to kind of help with my workflow because I'm doing everything on my own. And I think it's absolutely fascinating. It's absolutely the way of the future. But I'll share like my experience with Grokkoil because I've been playing around with this. And so it was kind of like, I put in my kind of imaginary profile and made my age what I need to be in order to hit that thing. And it would ask me just simple math questions and I would pick the answer. And based on like the direction that I was going in or where I was not answering things correctly, it would kind of circle back around a little bit and kind of repeat things in a slightly different way to kind of reinforce that. And what I found was that it was sort of like, it was able to, and I mean, it's embarrassing, but like even grade school math now, the way they do it is so profoundly different than what it was for me. It's like, I have to learn it all over again just to figure out why do we count these stupid dots? Like, why can't we, whatever. But I thought that was kind of an advantage at this point because it gave me the ability to really allow it to pick out where I was struggling, but it was able to kind of focus in on the things that I was struggling with and not just like repeating the things that I was able to do. Right. So it felt like it was kind of honing in on where I needed more help, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
then built on that. And it would kind of pick up on things that I would still like be able to do really well. So it didn't like eliminate those things from the mix, but it really kind of, it felt like it was really working towards finding where the struggle was and then helping me to navigate that and then overcome that so that I could pick up and keep moving forward. And that's kind of a unique thing in a sense that, like, I mean, I've had tutoring help when I was a kid, and it's, well, that was really the only option back then. But
Yeah.
this really is on. I mean, it sounds really weird again because we're talking about kind of programming, but like it's unbiased. So it's not trying to teach me the way it wants me to learn, if that makes sense. So it like identifies where I am and helps me build on those strengths, and then kind of overcome some of those deficits through some of that repetition and kind of circling back and kind of reinforcing certain things so that I can be more consistent in answers and move forward. And there was no, like I always felt kind of embarrassed when I was a kid and I had to be at a tutor or, get another person sitting across me. Like it just always, I don't know, it just made me feel kind of bad about myself. Not that they ever made me feel bad, but just, you know what I mean? Like you just feel like whatever. And I could see this being very helpful to kids who experience anxiety or who just, need help, but maybe just in kind of one specific area, or maybe they haven't even identified where the problem is. This can help to kind of narrow that down, and without casting like this super wide net and trying to just address everything, you can really boil it down to where the struggle actually is, help them there, because maybe they don't need help everywhere else. It's just this one thing. So why focus on everything else? Do you know what I mean? Is that
Yes, of
sort of a
course. Yeah, no.
correct? Is that sort of an accurate?
That's a really great way. In fact, yeah, there's there's so much you've just said there. Like I kind of like want to delve into like about 5 or 6 different things, based on what you just shared. Like I think like it is true, and this is like this very unfortunate thing that happens. Kids often, if they're struggling with something and the adults around them can't help them, they end up internalizing it. They think that there's something fundamentally wrong with them, that they don't understand it, right? And so when you're talking about like feeling feeling there's like something inadequate about you because you can't quite get something done. That's one of the main benefits of taking a sort of a diagnostic approach, and getting kids to sort of figure out for themselves through their own reasoning, what an answer like truly must be. And so I mean that's certainly one a big part of why the system works the way it does. And you mentioned there's like the system would try different things with you, and you felt it was sort of like I think you mentioned it was sort of unbiased. The way we've developed it is that and this is what we've done for the past like 11 months or so. We as soon as we had a lot of kids sort of on it, all we do is like we just review the learning sessions of kids. We see how the system is behaving for these kids as they get as they might get stuck on something, they don't quite understand something. Is the system changing gears? Is it attempting something helpful? Is it behaving in a way that's like kind of helpful but not very? And so we would just sort of continually make adjustments to that. And we're fairly agnostic when it comes to sort of like pedagogical approaches or anything. We just want to find things that will work for kids. We will look towards academic literature for inspiration, but we'll always just sort of try things and see what works. And whatever works, we will keep, and whatever doesn't work, we will just like let go of. But yeah, so the system has hundreds of troubleshooting strategies that it can employ. And so if it's not quite sure why a kid is struggling with something, it will try a lot of different things, and it tries quite a bit before it sort of runs out of ideas. And then even when it runs out of ideas, what it'll do is it'll go back and it'll try to reinforce precursor skills. So maybe I don't quite know why you're not ready to learn this, but let me go back and like reinforce these other things with you. And so one of the things we find is actually about 9 times out of 10, when you go through a diagnostic procedure with a kid, the kid ends up like recognizing them for themselves what it was. Like they end up making the connection already. Kids are very smart. So it's only about 10% of the time that you end up pinpointing like a real issue, and then you end up going into remediation for that underlying skill. And I think there was another thing that you had mentioned that I wanted to touch on, and I'm now drawing a blank. What you said was great, by the way. It was like, yeah, you are describing sort of like at least the spirit of the system very well. Yeah.
Um, how does this really benefit kids with like learning disabilities, or autism or dyslexia or dyscalculia, like you were saying earlier? How does that work, and then what types of results are you seeing in these kids?
Yeah, so it was about, it was just over a year ago. Rob and I, we were sort of looking through our data, and when a parent sort of creates a learning profile for their kid, they can tell us, like, do they have dyslexia, ADHD, like do they have any diagnosed sort of learning disabilities that we should be aware of? And initially, we weren't really doing much with that information, but when we started looking through, we realized, like, we have a huge number of kids that are using our system that actually have that have one, learning disability or more. And since then it's increased. We're now over 73% of kids on our system have at least one learning disability. It's 46% have two or more. Let me remember. 26% are dyscalculic, and 11% have cognitive impairment. So it sort of gives you an idea. It's about a 6x overrepresentation of the general population. But what happened was, so we thought, there was, clearly something there. Maybe we should sort of focus, on these learners and see how much we can help them. And then we received an email from a parent who said, like, their daughter has basically cognitive impairment, ADHD, bipolar disorder, and level 2 autism. Now, 2 of those are not like learning disabilities per se, but they definitely make teaching a kid harder.
Oh yeah.
And combined with cognitive impairment and with ADHD, like it's just like a very, very challenging kind of like learning case, right? And so we had no idea if we could help this kid, but we decided at that point. I basically wrote back to the family and said, look, we're not going to charge you because we have no idea whether this help you, but if you will be our eyes and ears, and if you will, like, we need you to sit down with your child, watch her use our system, tell us what's working, what's not, and we will also on our end, we will just, like, the moment a learning session comes in, we will review it, we will look at it, and we will try to make adjustments as quickly as possible to make the system work for your daughter. And we did that, and for a period of about just over 2 months. And after that, I mean, we still had to do a lot to help this particular learner out. But for 2 months, it was almost like the only thing we were doing was basically just improving the system for this one learner. And it was one of those things where we literally had no idea whether this would work, right? We thought, it's worth a shot. Let's see if we can, like, really push the system to its limits here. But for this kid, it actually did work. And this kid did end up advancing. It was like 1.5 grade levels in about 4 months' time. And so to put in perspective, this kid was enrolled in grade 5, was performing at, let's say, an end of a grade 1 level, but with serious gaps. I could not add. I remember it was 7 plus 5. We were seeing that she just could not add those two numbers together, for instance, right? And that's pretty much like it's almost a kindergarten skill. It's like early grade 1, late kindergarten kind of thing. And so we ended up, So to see this kid advance, to get all the way up into grade 3 in a period of about 4 months, we were really proud of that. That was something we thought was pretty cool. And so, and by the way, this learner is now halfway through grade 5. They stopped during the summer. If they had continued, I'm pretty sure we would have gotten. She's about to go into grade 6, and so we could have gotten her right to grade level, ready for grade 6. She stopped at grade 5. She's halfway through grade 5. Has not been using it over the summer. Probably well-deserved break from math. The kids made a huge amount of progress in very little time, but basically got, I think it was 3.5 grade levels ahead in the space of about 7 months in total, right? So. And since then we've had even more challenging cases. The most recent case that we have, and this kid is like really struggling and still very much pushing the limits of our system. We may not be able to accelerate her learning much more than she's currently learning now. She's not learning 3 to 4 times faster. She's more like 1.5 times faster. This kid has cerebral palsy in addition to dyscalculia, dyslexia, and ADHD. So for whatever reason, that combination it seems to be really a challenging one. But that particular kid is enrolled in grade 6 and was barely performing at a like end of kindergarten level. So you put that in perspective, like school, this kid is receiving specialized academic support, 6 years of regular schooling, and it's like barely like kindergarten. And then with us, at least she's doing like 1.5 grade levels of progress, in an expected sort of calendar year.
Oh, well, so, yeah. I mean, you're saying the way that you were saying it was like people were disappointed that it's not 3.5 times faster, but what I'm hearing is that you have a kid who is struggling to learn and they're learning and they're making progress. And that is amazing. That's absolutely amazing. So like, what are the parents saying? And well, let me ask you this first. Like, how are the kids experiencing this? Do they feel better about themselves? Do they feel more confident? Like, is it just like, maybe they enjoy doing it more? Because I think when you really struggle with something, you can have this kind of hate relationship with math, for example. But when you can start making progress, you maybe enjoy it more or just hate it less, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, in that regards, like our system's is not perfect. There are still kids we can see, like, despite everything we do, they're still not loving it, and they're still not getting kind of like hooked into sort of the activity. But for the kids that I've described, yes, a lot of them report really enjoying it. We've heard parents say, that their kids are asking if they can play Grokkoil. And yeah, in terms of the confidence, a lot of the kids, they end up being quite proud of what they can do. And we let them know that they've increased 2 full grade levels, for example, right, already. And so it's you do have there are all sorts of beneficial effects there that come from that.
So how are parents, like, what's the feedback from parents? Are they I mean, obviously it's positive feedback, but like, what are some of the things that you guys are hearing back from them?
Well, we're hearing, so we don't talk to all of our parents, but sometimes we'll notice problems in the system. We'll contact them and say, hey, we're working on this stuff for your kid. So the parents that we've talked to so far, often what we end up hearing is that, we've tried all of these other things, nothing was working. There are parents that have pulled their kids out of school altogether. The parents they're just like very grateful that there is something that is actually working for their kids. We have cases, by the way, where, like, the kids, for example, the kid that I mentioned with cerebral palsy, she's getting 40% of questions wrong. And when we looked at this, we thought, okay, this is terrible. This is a terrible experience for this poor kid. This is going to be demoralizing for them. They must be having a terrible time. When we contacted the parents about this, they were like, we love Grokkoil. My daughter loves it. It's so much fun. It's so much better than other programs. And what we realized there is this kid is probably her average experience is probably getting close to 80% of things wrong.
That's what I was going to say.
On other systems. And it's, on our system, we felt that this looked like a terrible experience. The average kid would not tolerate that kind of an experience, but for her, it was actually okay. And we still want to make it better for her. Like, I'm still not satisfied with how it's working for her, but yeah, it is interesting to see that, like, often the kids, especially the ones that have struggled the most, in some ways they're actually pretty resilient because they've already been through quite a lot. But yeah, but like I say, it's like, this is why we have a 7-day free trial. It's sort of, we want parents to have a chance. Try it out with your kid. You do not want to have to, go to war with your kid every day to get them to use a program that they don't like. So try it out, see if it's working for them, see if they take to it. If they do, great. We'll help them learn math at a really accelerated rate. And if not, that's okay.
No harm, no foul.
Yeah, exactly.
And so this is like, when I did it, I was on my iPad, just because, like you had mentioned when we talked before, like, that experience is really good because you could just touch and whatever. And it was a pretty smooth
Yeah.
experience. I mean, it's on a web browser, so it's browser based right now, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
so it's very intuitive, it's very easy to use. And then, parents can monitor progress and see how things are going, and you can see the improvement. And there is that positive reinforcement, but it's not like it's not over the top. It's not that like Jaws music or something, like when you get an answer wrong, or you know what I mean? Like it's just kind of very matter of fact. And so I thought it was a very positive experience. And I think that there's a lot of kids out there that can benefit from something like this, which is one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you guys, because I love bringing things to parents that they maybe don't know are there, or maybe they feel like they've tried everything, but just need another option or direction to go in. And this was a really unique experience for me to be able to kind of test this stuff out and get to play around with it. And it's really cool. It's really, really cool. And you guys put a lot into it, and I like how responsive you guys are. I like how you are, addressing people on an individual level, and making system adjustments for each kid that, that maybe if they run into something that isn't meeting your set standard that you feel like it should be, you adjust it in real time, and then you communicate with the parents. I mean, like that's unusual when you're dealing with like app developers or program developers and things like that. So commend you guys for that, because that's something that I pay attention to, and it's a really cool thing. And that's why I like, bringing something like this from you guys to these families, because they need help. Are you guys looking to expand beyond grade 5 to kind of continue growing with these kids?
We are. We definitely want to, and we have a number of kids that have like they've zoomed through and they're now sort of like hitting the end of grade 5. So that's why we're trying to get sort of grade 6 out for them, sort of just in time. But our focus is still like we still see enormous ways that we can help kids just in the K-5 like content itself.
Sure.
Like we already see ways that we can improve that, and so we will likely continue to focus a lot more there. Before we can add another grade level once, maybe every 2 months, if we're just all hands on deck focused on that. And that's not the rate at which we're releasing new grade levels, and that's why we're really focused on the
well, and when you catch kids at that younger age and you help them to overcome some of these challenges, I mean, the idea would be that they don't need Grokkoil for the rest of their academic career. It helps them to bridge those gaps so they can pick up and use what they've learned to be caught up with other kids and maybe learn in a more standardized classroom environment.
Yes.
So the ideal time to get kids would be in that younger age group, I would think. And then you're catching the kids that are, yeah.
It's where the problems start. It's almost like even when I was tutoring like high school level math, I never found that there was, these kids understood everything up to grade 8, and then it was in grade 9
It always
and 10
starts
that they started
farther back.
There was something earlier. Yeah. That's why, I think the system actually will become more and more powerful as we go to further grade levels, because it can just go down right into sort of the foundation. It just has like a diagnostic path that's much longer, and it can really pinpoint things. But it was for that reason that we had to start with the base. We couldn't just start with like grade 9 or grade 10, right? You had to get the foundation.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, that makes total sense. Yeah, because you start that foundation, and then you get those kids at a very early age, and then you're maybe correcting whatever it is that they're struggling with, and then they can use what they learned to build on itself and move forward. So this isn't meant to be like a lifelong crutch or anything like that for people. It's meant to help them actually learn, overcome, and be able to use what they've learned to, move on. So beyond that, grade 5 level, how can people find you?
Yeah, so our website, so www.grokkoil.com. That's GROKKOLI.com. Yeah, you just go there. You can see we have learning plans, that are available. You can choose from. There's a 7-day free trial. You can try it out and see how well it works for your kids. And yeah, we'd love to see you give it a try, and we hope that it can help you out as well.
And I feel very comfortable telling parents, like if you're listening and you think like, oh, this is whatever, like I would encourage you to reach out directly to you. We can put your information in the show notes so that parents can maybe ask some clarifying questions, or maybe they're just overwhelmed, or they just is this something that can help my kid? Or maybe they just want to have a little bit more information before they take that kind of step into the water. And you guys are very responsive to that kind of thing, which makes me like you guys even more, because sometimes parents just need that contact, that communication to help them feel like, okay, this is a direction we can go in. It gives them a little bit of hope, and they feel like they have allies in this. And I'm excited to see how this will be able to help kids who are struggling in math.
Yeah, well, obviously, thanks Rob for having me on. It's been a pleasure speaking as well. And to contact us, we actually have a contact us form on our website. I respond to 100% of non-spam contact us form
so
requests
don't spam.
that we receive.
You want,
don't try to sell me something. But yes, if you're if you're a parent and you have questions about the system, questions about anything, we take the time to answer to each and every one.
Very cool.
Reaches out to us.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And like I said, I have all the information in the show notes and blog posts and everything, so people can find you guys. And if their kid needs help, here's an option, right? So thank you very, very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it too. Cheers.